I was asked to redo or say more about how avoidant personality disorder is affected by work. But well, I was nervous about doing it, and I think the world is on my side because I keep having to redo this video. I've lost track of how many different versions I've done of this so far. Anyway, I also think it's kind of hypocritical of me to be talking about work because at the moment I have a non-traditional job and I work from home. Obviously, I don't make YouTube videos. What I do is I work in creative. So I don't have a boss and I don't have coworkers and I don't really have set timelines or anything like that. And I don't really have to take feedback. I either get paid because they like it or I don't. So I'm like, what can I say about it? I did, well, actually, and I also teach, which probably sounds really bizarre. But well, first of all, I don't think that I have regular social anxiety, like, social anxiety disorder, which again is not automatically that you get, avoidant personality disorder and social anxiety at the same time. I have discovered that I do best if I teach classes that are 8 students or less, because I've taught larger classes, but I tend to basically focus on a few students, and they would get a really great, experience, but other people basically would be ignored, which means I'm a bad teacher. So I tend to avoid larger classes, and I only teach a few times a year. I don't know. I used to work in accounting, which is about as opposite of what I do now as I possibly could. But I basically just stayed in my little cube. Oh yeah, about teaching. The thing with teaching is I'm teaching a subject and I'm having no personal information given out to my students at all. So I'm very non-vulnerable, and it's very hands-off. So when you're teaching, you learn some about your students, but you don't learn a lot. And it's a subject matter that's the focus, not the people. It's not an interpersonal relationship. But in accounting, I basically didn't interact with anybody. If I was working, people left me alone. I guess they didn't want me, to interrupt me and then have me have to start over whatever I was doing. So they were trying to be polite, and plus I didn't talk much, so they just didn't talk to me back. And I would be on the phone maybe half an hour a day, probably less. So I didn't interact with people. I just stayed in my little cube in front of the computer and did my job. And it was really bad. And I would, every second, from the second I woke up and most of the day when I wasn't so completely focused and concentrating on the work, I would have running constantly, it's almost over, it's almost over, it's almost over, because it was so horrible and intolerable. And it wasn't the interacting with people, it was hearing other people and their conversations. Because I was so basically silent, people either forgot I was there or they realized that I was not a gossip myself, so they would sort of congregate around my area and talk to each other, and I would hear so much stuff that I really didn't want to know about, and I really didn't. It's just it was bad. It was so bad that actually my doctor recommended, just basically put down her foot and said that I am not to work in an office environment ever again. She's basically declared that. Sorry, I've got cat hair all over me. My cat's keeps attacking me while I'm making these videos. He thinks I'm talking to him. Anyway, So, yeah, that's working in an office. I don't recommend it. I mean, again, so that's because it doesn't match my sort of personality. um, and my strengths, etc. I mean, yeah, I can do math and I'm pretty good at it. That doesn't mean, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I should do it. But as far as an avoidant job, it's pretty decent. People leave you alone. Although when they are dealing with you, there's a problem. And actually, for a while, I had an assistant also. I had a file clerk. And so I was boss. That was interesting. Having to interact and tell somebody what to do against my nature. But I did it for a while. Actually, what I did was I kept stepping up my rate of work until I was doing so much of my own work and filing that I basically cut that position, made it redundant. Isn't that evil? I basically made somebody have to change their job because I took over their work and was deemed unnecessary. That's one way to get somebody out of your life. I know somebody who's a locksmith, and that absolutely blows my mind. I'm just astounded because that's people. That's a lot of people. But again, how often would you need a locksmith in your life? It's very uncommon that you would need a locksmith twice, unless you're a landlord. And then how often would you need a locksmith? A few times a year, maybe. So it's a lot of people, but they're not, the same people. They're not getting to know you. You're not having an interpersonal relationship. But wow, I could not do that. I guarantee you, absolutely. Even though I don't have this thing, and that person who's a locksmith doesn't like crowds at all, and so it is a pretty solitary job. Usually, people, hey, how are you? Come in and you do your work. Usually, they leave you alone and let you do your job, or they stand back away from you. They're not trying to talk to you while you're doing it, again, because you could mess it up if you're interrupted, so they leave you alone. But wow, that even if it was one or two people, but like a series of them all day long, and every day, I can't even imagine. And then that would not work for me. But I can see that it would be an avoidant type job. I knew somebody who was a business owner, had a small business, which kind of is like what I do too. But more of a mine really is very, very hands-off, and I don't have to interact with people. This was more of a little bit more interactive with people, and same thing. I mean, it's like very similar. Again, you have all the accounting junk. You would have the scheduling junk that you would have to, and then the actual job that was done. I mean, I can kind of see that too, as you wouldn't think it would be similar, but it sort of is. So, and I know that most avoidant people don't work. I mean, technically, I'm one of them. I work from home, and I don't go out to a job, and I don't, so I used to. I did it for years and years and years, and sort of upgraded my life. He's back again. So, yeah, I'm about to be attacked by this cat because he thinks I'm talking to him. But, so those are some of the things to look out for. Is you can get these jobs that you wouldn't think at all. I mean, you just wouldn't. I mean, teaching, teaching as an avoidant job, but seriously, you know, the one that seriously blows my mind, though, are the counselors. Is that people want to be counselors. The thing is, I've never actually met or heard of an avoidant person who really was a counselor, but I hear that all the time. And I think that's what it is that the people, they've learned so much about avoidance and psychiatry in general that they're like, geez, I may as well do this for my job. But also because you are around people, so you get that people hit, but you don't give any personal information about yourself. Well, it depends on the therapist. I had a therapist that just couldn't stop talking about herself. And when I would finally get up the gumption to say, this is happening in my life, she would literally cut me off in order to talk about what was going on in her life and how that it was similar. It's like, oh, yeah, didn't work with her very long. But I don't see that as being successful. I just can't imagine. If there's somebody out there that is, you know, a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, or whatever, who actually deals with people, who's not, you know, just a, well, I suppose even theoreticals, they have to deal with people, but, see, now he's not getting, he was jumping in my face before this cat. So now that everybody's going to want to see the cat, he was not actually coming and getting in front of the camera. Figures. But I just don't see that as a possibility. So I'm not really sure the person who asked what they wanted to know about work, how to navigate it, how to get a job. I don't know. Is that what you want to know? So, but that's what I've done for work, and that's what I know other people have done for work. And you know, I knew somebody who was a photographer, although she wasn't like fully avoidant. She had avoidant traits, which are different. I saw an absolutely sort of mind-blowing comparison. I was like, yes, dead on. That said that it's the difference between traits and AvPD is like the difference between being pre-diabetic and being diabetic. You know, you still have to do the same self-care, but it's just not as intense or extreme or something. Anyway, so I don't know if that answers the question. I should like call this cat up here because I keep talking about him and talking to him. I don't know, maybe you can hear him purring. But I'm going to stop the video.